Can I ask a question in the meantime while you're setting that up?
Sure.
I'm curious about your statistics, because I'm a geriatric social worker, and so public safety and reducing risk is very, very important to me, because I work with a vulnerable set of the population. But I'm curious why your statistics have never been peer-reviewed, especially by an epidemiologist.
Actually, they have been. They have been. I have more than 100 peer-reviewed publications.
In a scientific journal?
That is correct.
What's the name?
That is correct. And I very often, for example, Asian biomedicine. For example, I also contribute data very often to people who are, in fact, medical personnel writing medical studies.
I know you contribute,
so
I'm just curious.
Check the footnotes.
The JAVMA publication that recently came out is contradicting what you've said.
Yes, and that article is actually authored by paid professional pit bull advocates. We're not actually here to debate that, but I'd be perfectly happy to debate those advocates at any time in a public forum.
Hey Merritt, I wasn't meaning to be a heckler from the crowd. My name's Josh Liddy.
Josh Liddy?
Yeah, I mean, what's your deal against our dogs? I have 3 pit bulls. I mean, why are you so adamant about driving breed-specific legislation home?
Well, first of all, you're not going to reduce shelter killing of pit bulls unless you have breed-specific legislation which prevents the birth of a huge surplus.
Well, don't you think of
this is the thing that you see, and this is why I mentioned how the numbers of intake are going diametrically opposite to the intake of every other breed type. For example, the same guy, Mike Oswald, that did the study in 1986, looked at the German Shepherd population, shepherds and shepherd mixes combined, which at that time was the most common shelter intake, 16%. Now, when you consider that there are around 150 recognized breeds, AKC and other major kennel clubs, for any one breed to make up more than 1% is actually significant.
Can I stop you for a second? How do we know the actual numbers when we know for a fact that licensing, people don't license their dogs?
What I'm talking about is a study of shelter intake that was done in 1986. Okay. We're not looking at licensing.
You mentioned a lot in your reports about actual populations.
Yes, but you're mixing up. I can talk about one study and I can talk about another study. I can't talk about 2 or 3 different studies at the same time.
They go hand in hand, though. Because you're using one part.
Yeah, I cannot outline the data from 4 or 5 studies all at one time. I've only got one mouth. Okay, I can tell you that in 1986, according to the study, about 16% were shepherds and shepherd mixes. And that was the biggest category of concern. And that has come down pretty steadily, year by year by year. It's never...
Was it from breed-specific legislation? Because that was your point before about...
Let me finish. Pit bulls has gone opposite to every other major breed. Now you see ups and downs of relatively rare breeds like Dalmatians. Something comes along, makes Dalmatians go up in popularity, and suddenly Dalmatians at one point went up from less than 1% to 4% of shelter intake in 1 year.
Was that because of the movie, right?
Yeah, in 1991-92. I surveyed the fiscal year 91-92, published the data in 93. So it was a 12-month period. And the movie, I believe, came out in the summer, so it was right at the beginning of that fiscal year. But the general trend for every breed, except pit bulls, which is it's a category. And I like categories a lot better than breed, actually, because if you look at large retriever, the large retriever group includes the Goldens, it includes the Labradors, includes the Lab mixes. And very often the breeder, if a certain dog becomes the dog of the year, they'll just change which dog's mate, and they'll turn out Goldens 1 year and Chocolate Labs the next, out of the same mother. So, but if you look at those groups, every other group's population trend coming down, except for Chihuahuas in Southern California. That's another problem. We didn't even get a chance to talk about Chihuahuas. But they're all coming down.
Good to see you, Merritt. I'll see you on email.
Okay. Well, it's always good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
So that's the one that's moving opposite. But when you have a trend that's moving opposite to the trends of all others, in this case it's surplus births of pit bulls, leading to surrenders of pit bulls to shelters, average age of about 18 months, then you need some kind of intervention. Now, there have been almost 35 years now of attempted high-volume spay-neuter programs targeting pit bulls. And it's been attempted in Ohio, it's been attempted in New Jersey, it's being done actually in New York City, California.
Yeah, I live in New York City, and it's interesting how impossible it is to access them, though. I mean, people line up at 5 a.m. and 2/3 of them are turned away because there's just so much demand that can't be met by the supply of surgeries.
Oh, the spay-neuter.
The number of spots
right.
that are available. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, so many people want to spay and neuter, but it's just really, really tough to access it. And these are people that have cars and can afford to get there and have the time to take off work. And so what I'm trying to do is try and reach out to those dog owners and cat owners. Not even intervention. These are people that aren't planning to give up their pets, their cats, their dogs, but they want the services, but there's just not enough supply of them. And this is in New York City.
I can think of a couple of reasons why New York City might be actually particularly difficult to expand the access, and that's just because real estate costs are so damn high. And the requirements to situate a spay-neuter clinic are pretty difficult. What Paws was able to do in Chicago, Paula Faceas, who's the founder of Paws, also happened to run a bank. Do you know her? You know her story? Okay. So running a bank, she had access to foreclosed properties and was able to get her hands on a very good facility,
right.
And that way expand the access. But if you don't have that kind of an inside, somebody inside real estate or banking, like in Paula's case, in New York City, the cost of real estate, and then you have the transportation issue.
Well, that's the biggest issue that we run into. Well, actually, the second biggest. The biggest is housing, and I was kind of disappointed that the speakers didn't address that more, especially as the number of renters are increasing and the types of renters are increasing.
If this had been held in New York City, where you have a very high population,
well, we're an anomaly in
renters.
that, but nationwide, about 34% of Americans are renters, and yet, these are people that love their pets, but they can't have them because most rentals make it impossible to have pets, especially larger dogs.
You also have to sort of split the renter population into several subpopulations, because you also have the student group who are mostly renters, but they're mostly not in the market for pet acquisition because they're leading a very unstable life.
Oh, I don't know. That's how when I got my a lot of people get their
well, some do, but most people get a pet when they're relatively settled down, and you're not putting everything in the station wagon and moving every 6 months at the end of the semester. And the other thing is, the other component of the rental population that you sort of have to split off are senior citizens who are in some kind of assisted care type facility.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I'm a geriatric social worker. I was the one that asked that question. And there's a misconception that most seniors, the 60 and older crowd, are living in some form of assisted living or nursing home. And actually, it's only about 90%, give or take, are actually living in the community, not in assisted living, not in nursing homes.
Around 25 years ago, I wrote a syndicated column called Senior Animal People.
Oh, really?
That was specifically oriented toward pet adoption, promoting pet adoptions by senior citizens. And this was encouraged by Mike Arms, who now runs the Helen Woodward Center, and he's now running, at that time he was at North Shore Animal League. And we were trying to coordinate it with the Purina Seniors for Seniors program, which I don't know if Purina is still doing it, but,
I don't believe they are.
But they were actually subsidizing adoptions of senior pets. So I'm aware that there was potential at that time for increasing adoptions of senior pets by senior citizens. At this point, like 25 years up the road of those kinds of programs, I think that the potential has probably been absorbed.
Well, actually, the biggest need, I actually run a program that helps seniors that have pets in Manhattan and need to keep them at home. And the biggest challenge is affording the veterinary care and housing and transportation. And I think that would probably be anywhere you look in the country.
Great foster home.
Those were problems then, too. And of those, the sleeper, we didn't see transportation coming when we surveyed this stuff out. But when we surveyed it out, we found that transportation actually was as big a factor as cost, and those were the two number one, number two. And senior citizens, even if they can take the dog on public transportation, which they usually can't, but for example, they can't get the dog up the steps of the bus, things like that we didn't expect to see coming.
Right.
But we found that those are actually significant obstacles. You can put the cat in the carrier, but can you get the carrier down the steps? And stuff like that. So Mike, with his program, began adding on assistance components, and he was using some of the Candy Striper type volunteers with the North Shore Animal League. But that's also the North Shore Animal League. They have the resources to do that kind of stuff.
Well, when you say we need breed-specific legislation and breed bans to kind of cut down the shelter killing,
you have to cut down the oversupply. And you're dealing with a population of pet owners who are not responding to the same messages that the rest of the dog owning community has responded to.
But my point is, isn't a large proportion of that due to the fact that the stereotype is out there? It's impossible to get housing because of the stereotype, renters, and you feed your statistics, which are based on media reports, feeds that.
Well, first of all, media reports are the most accurate ones because they're the only ones that are modus sourced.
Well, if we're going off
I've worked in the media for 45 years. I know the way media operates. I've worked in radio. I've worked in television. I've worked primarily for print newspapers.
So why's the focus?
You never write a story on a single source.
Well, why's the focus breed? And instead of last year, for example, out of the 32 or 31 fatalities, 26 involved either chained yard dogs, unsupervised kids, or loose dogs. This year, there's been 21 fatalities, 15 of which involved those components, yet you focus on breed. Why?
Do you remember what I pointed out in 1960?
You focus on breed, which can't even be determined. Why?
Well, actually, breed can be determined.
No, it can't.
Well, if you don't believe the breed can be determined,
the term pit bull is a slang term, sir.
Pit bull is a category like gun dog, like retriever.
It's a slang term.
Lap dog. It applies to a category of dogs who have been bred over the centuries for a specific purpose. The physical form of the dog has much less to do with
But there's not even a consistent definition of what a pit bull is. This person can look at something, you can look at something, I can look at, we can all look at the same dog and come up with a different conclusion. So if there's not a specific definition...
I can make the same argument. How do you define Santa Claus?
I'm advocating for dogs, man.
How do you define Santa
Dogs.
Can you identify Santa Claus if you see Santa Claus?
That's your metaphor?
You can identify Santa Claus in the same manner you can identify a pit bull. It applies no better to dogs than it does to identifications of Santa Claus, who can be basically any guy wearing a Santa Claus suit.
Right, okay.
But he has the attributes that are recognizable as Santa Claus.
He's got a red hat on and a puffy face.
Well, they specifically fit the role of Santa Claus. The armament that a dog has, the build that the dog has that has been bred for the purpose of fighting, doesn't coincide with being bred for the purpose of retrieving. Or
a dog doesn't come out the womb being able to retrieve.
Actually, if you ever worked with retrievers, you know that that's not really true. They start out with basic instincts that make them retrievers. Then you can hone that. But a retriever will retrieve, a husky will run.
Isn't a scent dog. There are certain characteristics in each breed that we celebrate.
Pit bull, like true pit bull dogs, if you're looking at the American Pit Bull Terrier, their terrier group. You mentioned before that the grouping is more important than...
if I didn't have one, I wouldn't speak
correct?
for them.
Am I correct?
Because I
No, you're not. If you talk to Patrick Burns of Terrierland, for example,
did you know that PetSmart
he
has a
argues
national
that there is no
ban
pit bull
on
who is
pit
truly a
bulls
terrier.
in their
Now, this is his argument.
Bulldog and terrier.
It's a national ban.
But if you look at the registry,
that must not be
what are they
enforced because there's PetSmarts out here.
What grouping are they in?
In their daycare.
I'm not particularly concerned with the registries.
I'm just saying, what grouping are they in?
It's crazy.
What grouping are they in?
It depends on what group. It depends on what organization. It depends on when you look at an organization that's set up for the purpose of registering pit bulls, or the AKC, which excluded pit bulls, so they had to call them Staffordshires. And they drew up different breed standards, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We're really talking about what defines the qualities that make a pit bull, the qualities that make Santa Claus.
For fighting and fighting only. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, fighting and baiting.
Basically, or yes or no?
Fighting and baiting. It's not a yes or no question, because fighting and baiting kind of go together. But some guys that were breeding them in the old days, I go back to the days when if you wanted to talk to somebody about pit bulls, you talked to the Ku Klux Klan. That's who I talked to when I first investigated dogfighting, because that's who controlled dogfighting in that era. And if you don't believe that, you're simply not old enough to remember.
That's not.
The Ku Klux Klan was the rural mafia. In the rural South especially, but somewhat in the Midwest, somewhat in Connecticut, in Rhode Island, and the other parts of New England, and somewhat on the Olympic Peninsula. They ran dogfighting.
Whether that's true or not,
the
I don't know what that has to do with anything. You're trying to tie the KKK in with pit bulls in an effort to make them seem like extreme or something.
The modern pit bull is the production of centuries of breeding by dogmen whose operations were protected by the Klan in much the same way as the drug operations were run by the mafia in the big cities. It is a protection racket. They also ran pigeon shooting.
Well, do you believe that dogs are individuals? I mean, just as a basic principle. I mean, because you talk about them as if they're not. So I mean, I'm just
dogs have extremely strong breed-specific characteristics, which have been bred into them for years. People don't. We're all mutts. We're all mongrels. very few of us have been bred to a specific purpose. In fact, I don't know of any. But dogs, more and more actually, are, as we have fewer and fewer mutts, fewer and fewer dogs on the streets, a higher and higher percentage of the dog population are the dogs who have the characteristics that have been bred into them, or bred out of them in some cases over the centuries.
We're not talking about behaviors, though.
We are talking, characteristics and behavior go together.
But I'm saying, are you talking about physical
you have to have the
behavior?
physical attributes to carry out the behavior. Now, the particular behavior that's of concern as a safety factor with pit bulls is called idiopathic rage. I've recently been talking with a genetic researcher who believes that she has identified, she's not yet published the data, she believes she has identified the gene that carries the trait for idiopathic rage. She believes that it occurs in roughly 1% of the dog population at large, but it occurs in somewhat more than 90% of pit bulls. It also, because genes turn out to be grouped, and what they do, it's how the gene expresses itself. So the same gene can have something to do with your hair color, your nose shape, the length of your legs.
Yeah.
They're seemingly unrelated traits.
But they're not, that's not behavior.
But some of them are behavior. And we're really just beginning to discover how much genetics and behavior in humans intersect.
So I have a behaviorist that I talk to, not to cut you off, but so a behaviorist I talk to, I mentioned the behavior and the gene correlation that some people make. And he said that I have a lot of genes in my hand, but does it make my hand ball up in fists and hit you? So that's behavior, he says. Okay? Genes make up, like you said, hair color, eye color.
If you were better qualified than someone else, though, to be successful as a behavioral strategy to ball up your fist and hit somebody, that could evolve. The ability to do that successfully could evolve into a successful trait.
Well, yeah.
Now, as it happens, dogs go through around 20 generations the length of time as a human being.
Dogs don't have
so
hands
you see those
disposable thumbs, so they can't make a ball up a fist, but they do have a mouth.
They do have jaws.
That's behavior, though.
And they can evolve characteristics that reward certain kinds of behavior. If, for example, if you look at the relatively short, squatty stance of a pit bull, do you know where that came from? That came because in a dog fight, if a dog is able to attack the underbelly, the dog's going to win the fight. It's a successful attack. So a relatively short, stocky body was an advantage for dogs in the fighting pit. And that's where that came from. And the four-cornered stance with the weight fairly evenly distributed, that comes out of the fighting pit. But those characteristics, evolving those characteristics, militate against the dog having a successful running away strategy, because those aren't the qualities that you would want if you're a dog whose primary strategy for dealing with conflict is to run. And historically, most street dogs, their primary means of dealing with conflict is to run away for. You rarely see street dogs fight. You almost never see.
But that's a natural instinct for any.
But if the dog has characteristics that will reward one behavior over the other, the behavior that is rewarded is the one that's going to persist, be passed along. If there's a genetic contribution to it, that's going to be passed along.
So you mentioned before about retrievers and other groupings. So my question to that would be, like, I have a dog that's classified as a pit bull, and he loves to retrieve. So is my dog a retriever because he displays that trait, or is he now a pit bull because he looks like something?
I would say that you have a dog who has learned to retrieve.
So
that does not mean that. Well, here's the deal. I learned to play baseball. Yeah. I love to play baseball. It's not a genetic trait, but my physical characteristics actually work in favor of my being a successful baseball player.
Well, genetics trait or not, I mean, even if the 4 to 6% of the population is pit bulls, like Colleen likes to say, and you like to say, like
I just finished running I run a survey on that every year. I just finished doing it, and it's actually now it's 6.7% counting mixes.
Well, that aside, like
that data. How did you acquire that data?
That's from classified ads. Every year I've been doing a survey of classified ads. I started out doing print classified ads, and eventually I switched over. First I started doing a mix of classified and electronic. Now I do it all electronic.
Sorry, I may have cut you off either.
Because at this point there's so many more dogs advertised electronically, it doesn't make sense to do print anymore.
Even if the 4 to 6 is accurate, which many people would dispute, that's still like 5 million dogs. So
it's actually about 3.5 million.
Well, a million is when we're talking.
We're talking about a million a year coming through shelters out of a population.
No, I'm not getting at that. I'm getting at how many actually fatally maul someone. I mean, how many are not doing that? When we're talking a million, 5 million,
actually, you'd be pretty.
10 million. I mean, you're working at like 0.001. Like
pit bulls.
That's what you're dealing with.
Pit bulls who kill animals per year, it's about 1 in 107. Pit bulls who severely maul.
I don't understand. Where's that stat come from? Pit bulls that kill animals. How do you determine that?
Why don't you go to my website and look up the study, which by the way was peer reviewed.
What's a pit bull? And where? I mean,
do you want to protect these dogs?
Of course.
Well, then why would you not want to get it at the source, the backyard breeders, to legislate?
I actually just wanted to see the sources of all the information.
To legislate for mandatory spay neuter,
things
like that. So that we don't.
You know how mandatory?
Talk about having.
Do you know how mandatory spay neuter's been pitched out here in California?
Well, I know that someone who agrees with breeding.
I'll tell you.
Here talking
breeding
to us
aside, have you been to meetings?
I think breeding aside
is
not an aside. If someone's sitting here someone sitting here advocates for
But you're
breeding.
asking me why I don't support it, and I'm trying to tell you. I've actually been to Riverside County, Riverside City, Pasadena, Lake Elsinore, Narupa Valley, all these places that have pitched breed-specific mandatory spay and neuter. Do you have any idea how it's always brought up by one politician, okay, and they pitch it, and do you have any idea how they talk about the dogs? It's not to get at shelter killing. It's not to get at overpopulation. They talk about pit bulls in a sweeping sense as if they're all vicious, demon dogs, land sharks. This is how I have video evidence. That's why I fight it.
Well, that's not a good reason to fight, stopping them from being killed in the future.
They're being killed because of the perpetuated stereotype. That's what I'm fighting.
Spay and neuter does not kill.
Almost a third of the population per year is coming into animal shelters.
Because of the bad stereotype.
It's not people who don't like pit bulls who are taking them to the shelters and dumping them. It's people who have them in their homes and have some kind of an incident.
No, that's not true.
That's not happening with any other breed.
Landlords do not allow these people, dogs in the majority of apartments. Come on, man. These are not trouble dogs.
If the landlord doesn't allow them to bring the dog into the apartment, then they don't have the dog in the first place. If a landlord has in the lease, when you lease that you can't have a pet, the landlord can enforce the lease. The landlord can't change the lease retroactively if you're allowed to have a pet and say suddenly you're not allowed to have a pet. You're grandfathered.
I mean, we disagree. Obviously, I appreciate you talking, though.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But like, as far as like the debate that you threw out, the idea, when can that happen, or if you're even interested? Well, I'd love to do it.
I've actually done a lot of debating, but I'm going to debate against somebody.
I've debated a city councilman.
Wait, Josh.
I still don't
Are you going to be in town
why.
this weekend?
Actually, I'm flying out tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, perfect. So we have.
I'm not here tomorrow night.
You said tomorrow night you're flying out, right?
I'm here to lunch tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
And I have another session, totally different subject, that I'm the facilitator for.
But how can that happen?
Other than that, I'll be flying out tonight.
Even if it wasn't this weekend, how can that happen? Because even if I had to fly to Washington, I'd do it in a heartbeat. How does that happen? I'm doing it.
Well,
I'll do it.
Yeah, send me an email. Let me know when the conference. Let me know when the conference is going to be.
I'm asking you. I got you right here.
What is the argument against what Merritt is saying?
We're just talking about specific legislation, and we obviously have different feelings about.
Okay, but as I have a pit bull, and my feeling is I'm not trying to discriminate against them when I say that I want mandatory spay neuter.
But have you ever seen it?
My feeling is I don't care what their reason is.
Okay.
I'm looking at what the end result is.
Well, I do.
You spay neuter your dogs.
Yes, of course.
So do we.
This legislation is not going to affect you anyway.
Well, what it's going to do though is it's going to give me the ability when I see 8 pit puppies, I can go and spay and neuter them. I can't do that. Well, if there's mandatory.
You need legislation to do that? Because I can't keep up with the demand for people.
Yeah, you just speak to them as human beings.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really.
I don't know where you live.
As you sweepingly judge the dogs, it's looking like you're sweepingly judging communities.
I'm just telling.
Just be
I live
human
in Ohio.
beings. I came from Ohio. He lives in Ohio.
I live in Youngstown. I live in Youngstown. I live outside of Youngstown. I'm in Campbell.
And Youngstown also has BSL.
Breeds, yeah, and nobody enforces it. I mean, to a certain
That's not the dog's fault.
It's not the dog's fault, but again, I can't go into the community and say you have to spay neuter.
Well, let me ask you this. You just said that nobody enforces the BSL in Youngstown.
I'm talking about.
Why would we enforce something that we can't?
No. We don't have spay neuter. I can't. We're talking about BSL. When I'm saying BSL, you're talking about what? That they can't.
I'm talking about BSL as a whole. Whether it be restrictions, whether it be bans, whether it be, you name it, whatever.
Well,
BSL
I'm not interested in banning. I don't know anybody that has a ban. Who had? I don't know what. Again, I don't know what it might lead to. I don't know where any community I live in.
A mandatory spay and neuter. Okay, check this out. So you have spay and neuter mandatory. Mm-hmm. What is that going to do in that city later on when all the dogs supposedly are already fixed?
Well, we're animal rights. We're looking for an end.
First of all, that's never happened, so I'm not worried about it being a problem.
I'm just wondering. I'm just wanting to know because.
Well, what I'm saying, my point is that the
whole
goal is to not have companion animals.
So if you have legislation to mandatory spay and neuter a dog within a city, so you said Youngstown, okay?
Well, I'm in Campbell, right?
Okay, but just pretend Youngstown.
Right.
So if this legislation is supposed to work the way it's supposed to work, that means eventually there's not going to be more pit bulls in that city. So it's working like a ban. Okay, it's working like a ban. It's a ban in disguise.
Yeah, I don't
argue against that.
Well,
Tell
first
me
of all, it would take
It's
about 5 or
pitched
6
as a
years.
ban. I mean,
But second of all, now this is where Josh may be right. I don't see any reason at all to breed pit bulls or any other dog who is inclined to or produced to kill and injure other animals. I don't see that as being an animal rights position. I don't see it as saving animals' lives if you.
But you're condemning millions of dogs before they've done anything, though.
Well, why am I? How could I condemn something that hasn't been born?
But if you have it not be born, but you don't have the problem. You don't have the problem of the animal killing some other animal. You don't have the problem of the animal injuring a baby.
But you're conveniently ignoring all the dogs that have never did anything. You're like the pre-crime master.
Now, if you look at the total population of dogs, you're looking around. I've been logging fatal and disfiguring dog attacks.
Yeah, from your house. You don't even make it public.
Well, let me ask you
I've looked at any number of researchers.
What dogs are used for dog fighting? Pit bull and pit bull types. Pit bull and pit bull types are used.
They're Japanese.
Regardless, focus on the dog fighters. This is the human element.
Well, the one way to focus on the dog fighters is to limit their source.
They'll just go to another dog. If you don't,
well, that's not true. There was never.
If you never focus on the dog fighter,
you telling me that they're going to fight beagles?
No, beagles are the only dog that exists outside of pit bulls.
Well, why?
I'm just saying, if pit bulls.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why pit bulls have been. I mean, I can't. I don't.
No, I'm just saying.
They're so abused. They are so
If pit bulls don't exist, you're saying dog fighting would just end? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that it would be more difficult for them. There's a reason why they use that particular breed. There's a reason why pit bulls are used. I don't see them using.
They're not even a specific breed.
Well, we keep talking about them like they're not, but every time you see somebody that has one, they refer to it as a pit bull. So
of course, but when people refer to it as a pit bull, they're not referring to it in a negative fashion.
I don't dislike them. That's what I'm saying. I don't dislike pit bulls. I just want to keep them out of the hands. I want to keep them out of the rings, and I want to keep them from being killed in shelters. And the best way that I know to do that is to limit the amount of them.
Right. As a pit bull owner myself, you have pit bulls. We all refer to our dogs as pit bull type dogs.
Right.
But when someone like Merritt or Colleen Lynn says they're only 4% of the dog population, they're not accounting for all the dogs that in the media you look at it and you go, oh, that's mixed with a pit bull. Based on what? So if it's got to swing both ways. I mean, if you're looking at every dog, that's 6% triples. I mean, potentially. So I mean, you can't have it both ways in that aspect.
Well, I know what what I want to see in the end. I don't know what you're looking to see in the end.
What I want to see is dogs be treated like dogs and not have breed be the primary thing that comes out of anything.
As an animal,
if a dog kills a kid or something, look at the circumstances around that. Don't just focus on breed.
You're only looking at
injuries or whatever.
You're looking at it as far as what the dog might do to another person a dog might do to another dog. My bigger concern is what other people are doing to those dogs. That to me, okay,
but those are individual cases that need to be focused on. If a person's abusing a dog, I'm not against.
Well, dog fighting, again, dog fighting is clearly done.
A reason to breed.
We're all against dog fighting. I mean, that's no one's for dog fighting.
What are you looking to see in the end? Are you interested in ending all dog breeding?
To fight with other dogs. I mean,
if I'm interested in ending all dog breeding, there'd be no more dogs.
I just don't see a reason to do that.
I mean,
right. So you're not there.
I want dogs to exist.
So you're there. You want dog companionship.
Of course,
you want that in there. So you're not clearly you're not on the spectrum of the animal rights issue.
I don't want dogs to be eradicated, breeds or dogs just in general.
Well, I don't think that they ever will be, but
of course,
but the end result is
you'd see that bull mastiffs and Rottweilers are in approximately the same bracket of risk, and I don't see any reason to breed those either.
That's Peter's position.
Well, I tried both dog and dog. I don't see a reason why you don't breed dog and dog. Why the hell
people are individuals, so they don't all have the smell.
Clearly, animals shouldn't be used, and dog breeding and owning an animal would be.
Everybody has their own perspective.
That's an animal rights issue. PETA gets the rap for it because they.
Okay, so if I don't agree with that, I just automatically am not for animal rights.
I don't know.
That's the way you're talking about it.
Well, animal rights is an issue of ending exploitation and using
the forms of breeding that create the most problems in the obvious place to begin.
I understand what you're saying. I just disagree.
That's another really obvious place to begin. And in Britain, I think that they're more likely to begin there than anywhere else. Here, I don't know.
See, the problem you mentioned an article. It was an Asian article. When I asked about the peer-reviewed studies and epidemiologists.
Asian biomedicine is a journal published out of Thailand. It covers the whole of Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And I did a series of 3 articles. 2 of them published, the 3rd one accepted, not yet published.
Do you have any peer-reviewed research that's been published in the U.S.?
Actually, I've had stuff in Japan, but most of the time I've been a supporting researcher rather than a primary author.
Do you have any epidemiologists that have supported your data?
Are you aware that I have a lifetime award for work in epidemiology?
I'm sorry, I'll say it again.
Are you familiar with ProMed?
ProMed, yes.
ProMed?
Yes.
Okay. I was the ProMed, what do they call it? Excellence in Internet Reporting of Emerging. It's their Lifetime Achievement Award.
For this data in particular, referring to
for my research on
fatalities.
dog attacks, rabies is the primary thing because that's the international organization. But
right, I'm interested in the
this comes out of the same.
Fight.
This is all the dog bite research and the rabies research are all out of the same set of research.
And you've received an excellence award of excellence.
Go online, look it up.
I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around this because I'm not aware of any epidemiologist that has supported your data in the U.S.
Well, you're simply not aware of ProMed. And if you're not aware of ProMed, you're not aware of 60,000 public health veterinarians worldwide. And I've been working since 1994, actually, with the ProMed people. I joined very soon after they started. I wasn't a founding member.
So why don't you publish in Javanna? I mean, I heard your criticisms of
I have that stuff in Javanna as a supporting writer. But you know, I don't make my living writing for journals. I make my living writing for mass audience, public audience. So many times I've done studies which have been through actually peer review, but then I publish the data myself. Because I'm making my living selling, it used to be the Animal People newspaper, now it's a website. Before that it was the Animals Agenda magazine.
It just seems like if it's such good data, why aren't we publishing it in Javanna?
Academic people get paid by how many publications they have in peer-reviewed journals. But I get paid by how many newspapers I sell, or
but if you believe so passionately about this, I mean, I would.
And I've been researching all aspects of animal-related problems for most of my life.
I understand, but it just seems.
So I publish it where it seems to me to be the most appropriate place to publish it. I'm not particularly concerned with being on a library shelf somewhere where nobody reads. I want to reach the audience in animal care and control, the audience in humane work, the public health veterinarians, which I think is actually the most important sector I reach, You have animal advocates. You know, all those people, they're all part of the constituency. They all need the information. The time was, this is going back into the 80s, time was that the average animal control officer did not have more than a high school education. They're not going to read a scientific journal. But if I want to reach them, and I can put it in a newspaper, and I put the newspaper in their office, then I can reach them. And that's what makes sense to do. In the current world, things have changed. You know, these days, there's a lot more veterinarians who are actually working for animal care and control agencies, working for humane societies. But that's something that's changed very, very recently.
Not to interject or cut you off, but I have 3 minutes on my battery. I want to ask you again, how do we do the debate? Because I'm down. Just letting you know, I'm down.
If you want to do some kind of a debate, send me some kind of a proposal. And I'll see how it works out with whatever schedule I've got.
Okay. But you can't give me like a firm, like, I'm okay to do it. You got to see like a proposal first. I mean, what are you?
That's correct. That's correct.
What are your problems or your concerns with just me saying, let's do a debate, yes, no? Like, what, I mean.
I have quite a lot of other things I'm doing.
Well, I'm not, so do I, but I'm not.
I have quite a lot of responsibilities.
We all do.
Coming to this conference actually took quite a lot of reshuffling and rearranging to do.
Of course.
I was asked a little bit late.
Of course.
But you send me a proposal. That's all you have to do.
Where do I send it?
You got my card.
I don't agree.
I don't, but I will when you give it to me. All right, thanks. Thanks, sir.
That they should be adopted out to responsible rescue.
That's not it at all. Go to their booth and ask them what their stance is.
I met Ingrid a few months ago. I know
Ingrid wants my dog dead.
Ingrid wants to ban all pit bulls. Look, here's
for PETA that has.
They believe that they're helping the dogs, but in effect, their stance and their website and their research.
I know. I have friends that work for PETA.
Consistently used to support bans against pit bulls, which means killing. No, I'm not talking about.
No, we're not talking about that at all.
I'm talking about pit bull.
They have a no adoption policy for shelters.
No, actually, they don't.
They do,
what
actually.
What they do is they advocate. They advocate for responsible rescues.
No, that's not true.
No, they do not.
Yeah, they do.
That's their double speak getting you. Sorry.
Let's go into their booth and ask them.